start by introducing myself a little bit, telling you a little bit about my background, and then I didn't have the time. So this is the state of my mind right now, and I thought I could maybe speak a little bit to this, and then jump into the design building project that I'm really here to discuss as it connects with you guys. Yes, I'm not a designer. I kind of was trained in political science, but I completely forgot about it. I fell in the design pit kind of randomly, although my mother was an artist. I'm surrounded by designers. I never thought I would really use those. I never remember the right side or the left side of my brain, and I thought I would be always this analytical, constructive, rational person. But then 10 years later, I realized maybe I was more creative than I ever accepted I was. So I started to curate a number of exhibitions. And coming to New York in about 20 years ago, I went to school to study museology, museum studies, and ended up finally working in a museum. But it was my door to design. And I ended up walking through design laterally, from one entity to the other, opening up my own brain to all kinds of designs and trying to create bridges between those disciplines within this sort of big pot, the big cauldron of design. And so as a curator, as a publisher, as a writer, as a magazine editor, I started to create my own thing, which I called Future Flair. Really, it was me. And try to develop projects that would connect with designers, help them promote themselves through creative projects. And through this entity, ended up creating a lot of in-between topics like design and obesity was one of the first projects I did. So a health department here for a biennale in France. Design and scent, I did for Parsons in 2010. There was an exploration of how designers and perfumers are thinking alike. Design and technology, and I've been consulting for a Swiss technology institute called EPFL that has embedded a sort of research studio with a local design school. So I help them often explore what it is to present all these results in America. And then design and the city. So this is when I started really getting crazy. And I launched this project called Exponential in 2010, 2011, basically saying, why aren't designers more involved in shaping their own city? And what are the platforms out there in which they can plug in their talent, their expertise, their ideas, their imagination, and participate in this conversation? And there's very few. And there are more today than there were 4 years ago. So through this project, I ended up realizing that really I needed to partner not only with designers and create these sort of interdisciplinary teams, but also connect with actual agencies in the city. And that got really difficult when you're on your own. So out of this project, I started working for a nonprofit called Design NYC, which is a platform to connect nonprofits and designers. And often the nonprofits are connected somewhat with some city agencies. And I'll go back to this through the description of the project. So anyway, this is like a very broad picture of myself. I call myself cultural engineer, for lack of a better word. I made it up. And I think of it as like a connector, a mediator, a facilitator, somebody who can navigate different worlds and can speak different languages, even within the design world. And I can go back to this to some extent, even though I've been kind of hanging out with graphic designers this past year. I'm always impressed or disappointed by the lack of open-mindedness of designers amongst themselves. So, you have the graphic designer here, the architect here, urban designer, and they don't even know about each other or understand the language of each other. So that's the first sort of translation role that I can hopefully help facilitate. And then there's like, how do you speak from design to other people, to city agencies, to people that are like you, interested in changing things. And the designer is quickly self-promoted as game changer, but it's not that easy to do. So this is an example of a project where I feel like the original idea of Exponential as a platform for change sort of, got replicated here in this project, which I'm currently leading for AIGA in New York. So So AIGA New York is a nonprofit organization. So I don't know how much of you know about it, but it's basically the trade organization for graphic designers. It's been around for years. The original national chapter was founded in 1914, and then the New York chapter in 1982. And the New York chapter is the biggest one of the states and the most active, and they're crazy. They're throwing like 70 events a year, and like more events than there are weeks in the year. And mostly their activity has been about self-promotion, connectivity, networking, but it's mostly about let's look at the work of people. Let's look at who is doing what, and let's just talk about it. And so this Design Relief project is quite different. It's the first time that they're actually launching an initiative that's about making. Even though they do this all day long in their own practices, but together within this framework of a nonprofit. And they got a grant from ArtPlace. So ArtPlace is a foundation, if you're familiar with them, that is actually a consortium of foundations. There are about 10 or 11 of them now, and they all have in common this interest in creative placemaking. So creative placemaking is like this strange buzzword that a lot of people are picking up. SBS has been picking up on it and has been for a while, but other entities such as PPS, Project for Public Space, and it's been up in the air. But lately, with this foundation, there's like definitely a sort of strong desire to pin the movement. And I was at a conference a couple weeks ago in LA, organized by ArtPlace, and the whole conference was about: are we a movement or are we a field? And so the consensus at the end of 3 days was like, we're not a field, we're about crossing fields. To start with, we're like in between community development, economic revitalization, and artistic endeavor. So we don't like to be called artists at AIGA, we're designers, it's different. So my point in this context is to say, okay, let's see what designers can bring to the conversation of creative placemaking. So Design Relief was launched about 9 months ago, and it was the grant was written up literally a month after sending. So there was this like looming desire to really help and figure out what can we do as designers and what can we quickly do. And then by the time we get the grant, it's like a year and a half later. So things have changed, but nonetheless the spirit of helping is still there. And so we sort of set this idea of like focusing on the waterfront neighborhoods that were particularly hit by Sandy, and trying to figure out what could design do, both to make these places more desirable, more visible, more together. So we had set like a number of goals. Some of the goals are very internal. So what can we provide to the designers that jumped in, or the members of the AIGA, or the people that we recruited on these teams. Internally, it's mostly about exploring that theme of creative placemaking, and then on the external thing, it's more about like how do we engage those communities through design. Community development has engaged people. They know how to do charrettes and workshops, and we didn't invent the powder here. But from a design standpoint, what can we bring that is so special? So we tried to define this creative placemaking, as I said, and the project of Design Relief is very much a test. It's like a lab, right? So we're figuring things out as we go, and we're trying to like make sense out of them and reflect on the placemaking notion in parallel with the actual making of the projects on the ground. So it's constantly this sort of double path, if you wish. So we were, inspired by, as I said, like the lighter, quicker, cheaper mentality or motto of Project for Public Space, but also this notion that often the graphic designer may be able to provide a lightness of being, sort of a fun, deployable, easily deployable, quick turnaround, unlike other designers. Industrial design is a super long process compared to graphic design. So how can we activate these spaces through these interventions that can change essentially the perception that people have of their own place? So these are the 3 words that we sort of crafted as our own motto: creative placemaking by design. Okay, so we want to be making those places more visible, making them within themselves more legible, what does that mean? Like, what are the markers within a space? What are the cultural references that people can associate with the place? And make them more navigable, which often has to do with, wayfinding, stuff like that. And how does these questions are asked within the sort of overarching theme of the night, which is resilience and post-Sandy situations. So, yes, so basically, we're trying to figure out how to push designers, especially graphic designers. Again, I really want to emphasize these differences of these disciplines that I mentioned earlier. Graphic designers are typically so into this MO of service providing, right? So they're like, okay, you want it to go? I'm doing it to go. Tell me the deadline, I'll do it. It's very like, transaction is very established, it's not super soft, and it's not very much empowering them to be an agent. So this project, on the other hand, put them into a position of coming up with the ideas, of questioning what is asked of them, questioning what is a partner versus a client, and really trying to have a leader role, which is quite difficult for people who often are working solo in their studio. So it's a tool for civic engagement, meaning designers themselves are becoming the agent of the civic engagement and are becoming themselves more citizen. But it's also using design as a tool to engage the people that we're going to work with. So what we did, and I sort of broke down this presentation in like sort of the lessons to be learned from this process. And I'm obviously very open to questions afterwards. And I have a bunch of questions for you, in fact. So the first thing we did is to write this manifesto. I'm not going to ask you to read it because you're not supposed to show slides that are to be read as a presentation. But we took some time to write it, and it was important at the beginning for the fostering of this idea within AIGA to create like this sense that we're going to have a special initiative and we believe in this. And manifesto is such a 60s thing, it's like, it's kind of coming back, but it's kind of nice to have like this sort of statement, this is what we believe in. And every once in a while I go back to it and I'm like, do you believe this? Not so much, but we're checking boxes too. So again, this manifesto was sort of written up as a differentiator. How does graphic design operate within this placemaking, creative placemaking area where mostly urban designers have intervened. And for urban designers, the word creative doesn't come necessarily with placemaking. So you've heard probably a lot of people, to the CEO or city planning, like talk about placemaking, which is sort of like the next generation after master planning. Forget about master planning now. That means that there's no people involvement. So placemaking is about involving people. But creative placemaking has this like extra cherry on the cake of having a bit of an artistic, flavor to it, which goes along with perhaps lightness and maybe more ephemeral or less transformative of the entire built environment, but more about the perception that people have of the built environment. So we sort of tried to write this out again so that we would differentiate ourselves from existing practices that are it's still emerging in this field, and at the same time also reinforcing this belief that the designer can do this, and we want to believe that we can be at the table with the big boys to discuss this kind of things. So to organize the project, we started with a sort of very lean and very structured process of an infrastructure for this project. So I work with a very small committee of amazing guys that are my mentors and advisors on this project. They all are on the board, and they intervene in various ways, on design direction or advising on strategy or whatnot. And I'm basically working with 3 teams that are all composed like this. It's the triangular magic solid form of the designer in collaboration with the community engagement strategist and having an embedded storyteller. So the sort of rationale behind this triangular magic team, dream team as I call them, is to make sure that the designers are entering this work of creative placemaking with this strong plan of being participative, that create ways to engage the people that they're going to serve, and not just arrive in those 3 neighborhoods of Red Hook, South Street, Seaport, and the Rockaways as parachuted, which is a fear that we all have, and there are parachuted over the past year, as you know, and especially in sort of post-Sandy situations. So it was very important for us to make sure that the designer, who's not necessarily familiar with these sort of like more urban designer, planner practices of engaging, you know, populations represented by nonprofit, but also small businesses, as well as major stakeholders in those neighborhoods, to really have a philosophy and a practice, like grassroots, you know, organizing, community organizing background. And the storyteller idea is something that I've coped with over the past 5 years. This difficulty of like telling the story of what we do, and it's this ongoing issue with these projects because you know it's not like you are revealing a poster and revealing a new car. It's like there's no like aha moment. It's like it's all about this linear, continuous, ongoing collaboration. And sometimes it's challenging from the design standpoint to sort of stop and say, okay, so what is it that we needed to announce here? Like, what is this milestone that we just passed? And how can we like figure out how to share them? And honestly, I've had a lot of difficulty managing the storytellers in this project. It's been very difficult for them themselves as people that, you know, we picked like a photographer slash writer slash communication designer. We picked a woman who's an art director and who has a great interest in social impact design. We picked, on the third one, who did it again, I forgot, an infographic guy. And so I thought, great, we're going to have all kinds of languages, we're going to have different visualization, they're going to know how to tell their story from within, they'll be part of the group. And you know what happened? They all wanted to be designers. Impossible to just like stop and like step back and really analyze the sort of, you know, happy moments and difficulties and really be honest with this process. So it's been quite a challenge, but I'm about to share with you next week 3 reports that will cover phase 1 of the project, from discovery to design development. So watch out for the sites. And then so these are the teams. As I said, they're recruited amongst designers, former designers turned organizing experts, people that have a strong urban background, urban interest. None of them are architects, none of them are urban designers. Sometimes I wonder whether we should have added some urban designers. But then I would have, you know, betrayed AIGA, so I couldn't do that. And then we have people that are, you know, on the youngest side of things, but that have also been interested in this conversation of design. So we have the Ready team, the Rugby team, the South Street Seaport team. You see they all work very hard in the winter, and it was very cold. And creative placemaking in the winter is just not a good idea. And then we sort of expanded that ecosystem that we created with the mini team with this larger connectivity with the city. And of course, these connections are only emerging as the engagement is happening, only as, you know, the concept that they are proposing is sort of crystallizing. But we definitely have a filmmaker crew that's trying to follow those 3 teams and trying to figure out how to document this, and we'll hopefully have a little film at the very end that would be our deliverable. It's like the story design. And then city agencies, this is all of you here, so I'll get your cards at the end, so I can call you and ask for help whenever we want. And I'll go back to specific questions afterwards. And we made a partner, an education partner with Pratt Institute that sort of worked alongside the Ready team. So just to reflect on this sort of structural management of teams and designers, putting designers together in one pod. One thing I'm not going to do ever again is to put designers that don't know each other in one team. That was like a mistake I made. It's really fun at the beginning, but then, you know, it takes so much time for them to understand of each other and understanding the dynamics and the personality and the egos and all this. We were losing time. So the next project, I'm just going to ask one big firm to identify their own people so that they won't have this sort of acclimatization of personalities that we have to deal with. But so collaboration is principal conflict. I'm quoting here an architect from Morphosis firm in LA that I just heard recently, and I thought this is perfect for what we're experiencing here. Collaboration is tough. Collaboration is a big word in design, and it's like it's so cool to be collaborative, and everybody's jumping on this opportunity, but in fact, when you really are working together on this project and you have completely different languages, completely different viewpoints, it's not easy. And it makes people cranky and frustrated. And as I said, we're a lab, so we're making mistakes, it's not always fun, it's going to be fun eventually. The hot potato job is this thing that, again, I was like addressing this issue when I was at Design NYC already. It's the project management. So maybe you guys are more organized than designers are. We always think that we can do everything. But then there's like this thing, this realization that project management is really like a not sexy job, but it's the best, it's the most important thing to make it happen, right? So you can't ask a designer to be a project manager. You can't assume they are. Some people have it, you know, more natural than others, but in the end, it always comes back to this challenge of like trying to find the right person who knows how to do this from within. And then finally, small is still good. This is not a sexual statement. It's really about encouraging the designers to constantly think that a small gesture, a small project, a prototype, even though it's not perfect, can be really, really impactful and can really change the way people understand what's happening, you know, in their neighborhood. And I go back to this idea of prototyping, which is also a buzzword at the moment, which comes from more of an industrial design, you know, a practice where you test things and you bring it to people and then you make it in another material and then you change the scale. But in graphic design, you rarely have that moment of like testing things out, because in the end, you know, you do the logo. I mean, maybe there's like a green logo or a red logo. I'm caricaturing here, but hardly, because in the end, it's not in their mentality to show things that are not finalized, right? So what I'm seeing in the graphic designers is that they have a really hard time showing me even anything that's not perfect. And I'm like, I don't care. Just like throw ideas, like go into the neighborhood and do like a cardboard thing. At least you're going to get people coming around you and say, there's this thing, you know? No, 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 it's too precious. So there's a preciousness to graphic designers that this project is really pushing and questioning. It's really interesting. So, as I said, we had a community engagement strategy overall, and you know, embedded in each team, somebody who knows how to. The guy on the red team, James Andrews, is an amazing guy who is an artist who worked in Flint, Michigan for the past couple of years on like pretty drab, you know, neighborhood. But this is sort of like a picture of like how many people they've interconnected with over the past 4 months. They've spent about 90 hours community organizing in one way or another together, and really made a point in this particular case of plugging in. They didn't come in the neighborhood and say, oh, we're going to have our little powwow here, come to us. They came to people. So they made sure that they would identify existing events that were already on the calendar of these people that are, in any case, fatigued by the post-Sandy recovery, this or that, or the Cuomo thing, and the New York City thing, and the clown this, and they're like tired of listening to all these designers that are going to change their world. But nonetheless, our team managed to plug in, so they were less intrusive in a way, and managed to make friends through various workshops and conversations, sometimes one-to-one, to, in the end, identify 3 partners that I'll go back to. But, you know, this work of like trying to test out who are we going to work with was very important. Their statement from the very beginning was to say, we're going to focus on the 85% residents of Redwood, which are low-income housing people, in the Nightshot project, and not the other. And that was like a statement, positioning from the beginning, which largely colored the kind of partnership with the Tenant Association. On Wednesdays, we tried to also connect with Good Shepherd, which is also an organization that works very closely to them, the Redwood Initiative. So organizations that were already very embedded with this particular population. In the Rockaway, they also did the same mapping and meeting, and perhaps were a little bit more like forceful and like organizing their own events, but always with a partner. Here with YANA, which stands for You Are Not Alone, an organization that came out of Sandy, and that became a sort of like prototype itself of like, you know, recovery and being together, working on this sustainable space, and imagining, you know, greener futures for the neighborhood. And also quickly made a point about partnering with The Wave, which is the local newspaper, which has a circulation of 12,000, which is not nothing really in Morocco. So they were very smart about, you know, finding the right connector to the community. A community that is by nature super ghettoized, incredibly balkanized. It's like if you live here, you don't know what's going on here. You don't read the newspaper if you go too far in Brizzy Point. So Kevin at the bottom is the editor of The Wave. Sal is the founder of Yana, and then Milan is the founder of the Rockaway Youth Task Force, which is also a small group that emerged after 70. This guy is 22-year-old, and is the next US president. The C4 team had a very, very different approach to community engagement, and this was a recent charrette that we organized in phase 2, starting with phase 2 of the project, but the phase 1, and I'll go back and describing the project, but what happened with this team is that they were given a space in South Street Seaport, thanks to EDC, our friends. And the space is an empty box under the FDR, and it was empty and it was not used, and so we said, oh, let's just take it over, and we'll do something that will bring people there, so that it will become the center of attention and the sort of neutral territory where people in this neighborhood, which is super polarized, not so much on like ethnic and social differences, but rather on the future of the seaport with the development of Pier 17. And we're sort of killing each other for like the past 6 months. So we arrived and saying, we're the embassy, you know, we're like neutral, we have no investment, but we're going to show you who you are, like almost like a mirror. So the whole strategy of engagement was very different that way, because we had a design installation already set up to engage this conversation, but at the same time it was, as I said, winter, so nobody came. Really hard to get people coming down there in this space. So I'll go back to describing the project later. So what I learned about community-centered design is that in establishing these outreach methods with the different communities and different community representatives, whether they are existing community nonprofits or they are new forces that are financed by recent funding, such as New York Rising in Red Hook is the Cuomo-funded initiative, or you know, small individuals that have been part of the landscape, you know, activists that are sort of part of the, you know, part of Red Hook, and there are a bunch of them, believe me. They are our partners, not our clients. So that was a sort of you know, a negotiation that we had to clarify at the beginning. That, you know, it's very different because everybody has a say, but at some point, you know, we need to move on and make a decision. Democracy is never really written into design. So it's nice to, like, at some point say, okay, we're finding some sort of common ground, we're hearing you, and this is what we come up with. But we're not in this sort of like contractual one-on-one relationship. That was very important for the designer to understand. Community-driven versus designer-led, okay, that means like, okay, when do we stop engaging this community? At some point, the designer has to go back to designing and not being sucked up by the community engager, which, believe me, they all did, because they were fascinated by the process. And that designing this engagement is also, in a way, an act of design, but nonetheless not something that they were necessarily familiar with, and often like put in the second seat as a result of this. So it took them a while to like come back and say, okay, we heard enough, now we know what we need, I think we know what we need, let's just try to design again. And it's almost like they were afraid of like going back to the drawing board. Again, perhaps this preciousness does not help, because they want to do everything perfect. And then lighter, quicker, cheaper, really? I mean, so this is like, the Red Hook initiative is perhaps, the Red Hook project is perhaps like the one where they asked me this question, because they came up with a small project that could be a small project, or it could be like a $500,000 project. And because there's like this potential and these fundings floating around, they almost are like afraid to do small. again, small is good, but they think that it's better to wait and have a little bit more cash here, do a little bit more fundraising, waiting for New York Rising to decide themselves. I'm like, stop it, just do something, because we have to stop on June 1st. We exist based on this grant that expires in 2 months. So we have to do something quickly. So, as I said at the beginning, the creative placemaking theme or movement or field, whatever it is yet to be determined. So my point was to, from the beginning, to try to inspire the designers to really think along these lines. And one of the main challenge for them was to think in terms of place. Right? So you know, again, for graphic designers, their place is like a piece of paper. It's a scale that's like fairly humanly manageable. But when you start thinking about the city as your canvas, it completely changes the conversation. And especially in this case, so a lot of them had never practiced creative placemaking projects. So we made a point of inviting experts coming from outside and inspiring them. So this was this really cool guy from London who works at Tate Modern, and he's in charge of regeneration, as they say in English, and community partnership. And he's actually the head of a bid. So he's looking at how Tate Modern as a business and as a cultural entity is sort of connected with its neighborhood, has completely transformed it, and also trying to figure out how to leverage the content of the collection and spill it out onto the streets. So he was super cool. And Rudy Bohr is a Swiss typographer whom I've admired for the past 15 years, and who has worked both as a, you know, the Mr. City calls Rudy Bohr for anything that has to do with signage, for big cultural quarters or museums or, you know, parks and stuff like that. But then lately he's been working in Switzerland, in Geneva, through this program called Civic Design. No, sorry, Civic City. And his point is to say, we need to push the designers in the city. I mean, sort of doing exactly what we're doing here. But from this graphic design standpoint and typography based. So his point was to show how you can write the city. And how writing your city is writing your history, and writing your future. And writing is an act of participation often. And he created all these like beautiful projects in Marseille, different cities that he showed us. And then we had a little powwow in January to finally share publicly what these teams had been cooking for the past 3 months. And it was very, very good and very cathartic, I think, for them to be able to be public with what they were doing and also share within each other. So like the team Red Hook could know what the heck the other team was doing. They don't have such a such a competitive edge, but I thought they would be interested in doing what the others were doing. So we did that in January. Then we invited the director of the new director of the Art Place Foundation to give us the crash course on creative placemaking. And then we suddenly learned that in the end, the indicators that we were all afraid of manipulating or taking into account that are called vibrancy indicators, which is sort of the sort of impact measurement reference that the foundation has set for themselves at the very beginning, were not necessarily that important, or they could be sort of used but not always, depending on the situations. We were like, oh, we were saved, you know, and everybody felt like much more at ease with this idea that they could come up with other impact measurement. We don't know what exactly they are, but nonetheless, the conversation was super inspiring for us. And then we had a walk organized in partnership with Open House New York, which is, you know, as you know, an organization that invites people to discover unvisited places in New York and thematic walking tours in the city. Typically, the weekend of Columbus Day, but they've had like a number of series, and one on the seaport, largely inspired by the fact that the director actually moved there. So we had a little powwow with them. And then this amazing woman came to us about 2 weeks ago from Boston. She's working as an urban designer and a creative placemaking practitioner through her company called Civic Moxie. And her name is Susan Silverberg. She wrote a white paper about creative placemaking that was published at MIT. And she basically gave the lay of the land of everything you needed to know. I should have invited her in October when we started, but I didn't know her. But she basically gave the teams like sort of difference between creative placemaking and placemaking, space making, creative placemaking. She gave a number of examples where she was leveraging cultural references or cultural roots in places that she worked. For Puerto Rico and Boston and all this. So it was a very good introduction to the seaport charrette that we had just after, because we're dealing here with obviously a historical landmark neighborhood. And then I found the space for the Rockway, but not the speaker yet. This really cute church could be a nice venue because there's not that many venues over there that we can actually sit and let people. But I know the topic will be about this notion of mobility, connectivity, to sort of reflect on our Rockway team project. We created a Tumblr page embedded into our website around creative placemaking, again trying to inspire our teams to look at other people's work and nurture this conversation. So I invite you to put up stuff if you have good examples. We had a little bit of press coverage. We worked with Pratt on the Red Hook project, and I'm just going to go into it. So the Red Hook team, to give you an update on what they're actually making in these places. And again, you have to remember that we're in the middle of the project, so I don't know all the answers, and I don't have much to show you. It's still in the prototype stage. So the Red Hook team was, as I said, focused on helping the low-income community of Red Hook. And one of the main needs that emerged from all these conversations they had with the different stakeholders was the lack of information and the lack of communication between themselves and each other, and the lack of public space. So how do you take those three things and you put them into one thing? And this one thing is called the hub. So the hub is basically a bulletin board, a glorified bulletin board that has both a physical existence and a digital backend. And the design of the backend information infrastructure is as important, if not more important, than the actual bulletin board. The bulletin board could be just like the one you see when you go to the lake, in rural towns, or it could be one that has a tipper on the top and that's some sort of like Wi-Fi connection, so you can feed in from various sources. So the sources, I don't know whether I should, no, the sources of the content, because this is the big challenge for this kind of project. Who is putting up the information? So from the beginning, the idea was that this was going to be community-driven, community-managed, community-curated. Well, again, democracy and design, they don't work together. So at some point, somebody has to decide, what are we saying, who is saying it, what are the official, recognized voices of reason here. So we have like three types of content, like some of it is going to be like sanctioned by the Red Hook Initiative. Digital Stewards is like a sort of small group within the organization that has been very focused on like providing Wi-Fi access in this neighborhood that was completely shut down during Sandy. And also really empowering those kids to learn about these new professions. So they're going to help a lot with that filtering and organizing the content. There'll be a website where you can upload your flyer. The flyer will be pre-designed, so everything looks really nice. You'll have like content that's temporary versus long-term. You'll have like hierarchies of content, but it's happening. So now the situation, because that was the big question, like where do we put this thing? Again, in a place that has no center, a place that has no community ground where people say, oh, let's meet at the blah blah. Like, there's no such thing. So in the summer, the coffee park, which is this little tiny green park in the center, somewhat has traffic, but nonetheless, in the winter is completely dead. You have like a subway which is super far away. Have you been to Redwood? Like it's so hard to get there. So then you have to take this bus, and you're like wondering why you're going back 10 times. So finally, they decided to put it at the Mitra Center, which is closer to the subway when you get off the subway. You pass under the PQE. So you'll have like this existing panel that they're going to use for this. And then they want to launch this with a campaign so that people also feel like they can be part of this and they can be proud of having participated in one way or another. So we'll be launching this kind of on the late side because they're as I said, they were trying to think too big, but it's going to be cool. So that's that. And then in the Rockaway, their project has to do with connectivity, social connectivity. So resilience as in how do we make sure that we talk to our neighbors? Again, in a land that's like so open up. And they decided to go with the Wave on this partnership as they were themselves trying to figure out what to do with their museum archives that they had started to build before Sandy, and like completely washed out during Sandy. So the museum was sort of this like dead thing, piled of boxes that are all rotten. And the Wave, having created this sort of side project, was thinking, how do we revitalize this idea and make it like a living? So they were interested in maybe starting this oral history project. So when the designers came in and said, we're looking for like quotes from people, suddenly the designers became the catalyst of this project called Rockaway Connect. So now the designers have actually pushed the Wave, their partner, in like actually making something that was up in the air. And that's what I'm seeing a lot in this project, is that the designers are almost like, I mean, I hate this word visionary, but there's like this, you know, this like, they're like right on. They just put their finger on like where things were in the air. It was kind of like emerging. It was in the conversation. Everybody's like, well, that was my idea. But it doesn't matter. You know, in the end, they're making it happen. So this is a beautiful project that will be unfolding in May. I invite you all to come on May 3rd to hang out around Beach 90th. And they'll have a, you know, something of this recording that they've been conducting locally in Yana, as I said, and the Wave, and location I forgot now. And so all these quotes are actually from people. They'll have a partnership with the Wave, so those will be inserted inside the newspaper once a week. And then the record of these recordings will stay in the museum as part of the living voice of the work, right? In the South Street Seaport, as I said, we had this box. We called it the box. So it was like, it was supposed to be like a bike storage or NYC info center or something. But then, you know, construction started on the Pier 17, and this was pretty dreadful down there in the winter. So we tried to create like a little glowing lantern, a little campfire, for people to say, oh, what's going on there? And so we got their attraction that way, and opening very softly at the end of December, and then having a party in January, inviting basically the community, meaning the local community of people that are mostly businesses, to come and basically write thank you letters for people that have helped them during the Sandy or after. And it was this very simple gesture of empathy and you know, sharing their gratitude amongst each other and with each other, and hooking it up. So this sort of gesture of raising your message, definitely you know, sort of piggybacking on the vernacular tradition of ship culture there, but also really symbolic to say, okay, I'm making this public. And so these cards, there were about 200 of them that got gathered over the duration of the installation for about 3 months. And then we had like lots of tourists, nonetheless, coming to this box because, you know, South Street Seaport is like the ultimate tourist destination. And they were like, what? Sandy? What is Sandy anyway? And girl, it was really interesting to see like the degree of awareness in the, you know, international media. But we're going to make a booklet out of this, and this is like sort of understood as of today. Things might change next week. I don't know yet because this team has been really tough to work together. But they are looking at how to continue this idea of like unearthing the treasure of the seaport. This was the treasure, like the human treasures in a way, like human bonds, as something that you can't visualize, right? And people have this weird sense that they all like are either with this organization or that organization. There's less of an activism culture. There's less of a sense of community. You have the newcomers. You have this devil real estate developer there who's from Texas, imagine. So there's like a really hard time to really get them together. And suddenly when they saw that, they were like, oh, that's what we are. So it was almost like a mirror of their own selves. So we have a lot of things that still need to come up in the next couple months. It's kind of scary, actually, how many things need to be done in the next couple months. But as I said, there are like a few events that we're trying to like confirm. We created placemaking talk in the Rockaway. Maybe you should come. It would be nice to go to the beach. And then I'm trying to work with our friends here from New York Rising and Van Allen, Rebuild by Design, to figure out whether we can sort of put into one people that work for the government, and one for the state, one for the city, and then for this foundation to see if we have like notes and you know, ideas to compare. You know, it's very, New York is very provincial that way, so everybody's like sort of doing their own thing and want to share, live in the way. And then in the communities themselves, we'll have launch events. So in the Rockaway, as I said, the May 3rd is like the official party of the wave, and that should be nice. And on the 26th, we might have like a little workshop for the kids. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about this. We have like educational program that we would bring to the neighborhood so that we can show them also what a designer does, which is kind of a nice thing that we can do to inspire them to become a designer. And then in Red Hook, they should have an opportunity to connect with the existing Red Hook Fest, which is early June. So we might wait until then to actually launch this bulletin board, and it'll be built by then. And then South Street Seaport, I don't know, we're trying to figure things out. So, but most importantly, you need to come during NYC by Design. Do you know about NYC by Design? It's the city initiative to celebrate design. So it's a festival that started last year with an intent of like celebrating designers, design industries, design makers, not just furniture design, which has been the industry that has basically led the design presence in New York over the past 20 years, with the ICFF, which is the Furniture Fair. That marks the end of this festival, and at the beginning of the festival, it starts with Art Freeze, which is a new art fair coming from London. So they're trying to like expand the definition of design, again, my cup of tea, you know, design, interactive design, urban design, and trying to figure out like what are the different ways in which the design community can also be more visible to the outside world, because there are a bunch of international journalists coming to town for this event. And so we're having a meaningful space in Sunset Park, a very raw space that will have huge windows that we're trying to cover all our stories about design. And hopefully by May 10th, I'll have more detail to show you. And then this is just to finish on a scoop that I can share with you today. We're going to work with a bid, Dumbo bid, the Business Improvement District, because they looked at design relief as an interesting model of creating places of being and ways to engage designers in this conversation. So we're going to partner with them this summer to imagine a fitness loop around the Brooklyn and Manhattan Bridge, and sort of figure out how can graphic design help make this loop a reality, visible, legible, navigable,